Right, Debbie, time is 12 minutes past 9. You're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything to me. How many defence? Don't mention one question, something for the court.
What do you mean I'm in
Anything you do, say no,
suspicion of
give me
murder?
evidence.
What do you mean I'm in suspicion?
Right, just stay sat there.
Viewer discretion is advised for this educational documentary. By the way, this is Dark Case, and you can call me Jack. I bring you rare and unseen true crime cases, as well as other things that you may later regret knowing, with multiple uploads every single week. So if that sounds like your bag, then join the Dark Case family now by hitting subscribe and turning all notifications on. And now for today's silly little question. Would you rather be totally bald or have 10-foot long hair on your head that you can never ever cut? An important question, so let me know your answer down in the comments. All of your support over on Patreon as well as right here on YouTube via channel memberships are so appreciated. So thank you so much. But now, on with the video. It was just past 1 PM when emergency calls began flooding Dorset police. The woman who made the first discovery had been sitting beneath a tree to avoid the rain. She was close to the zigzagging manor steps in Bournmouth, and then she heard a strange thud right next to her. The thud was made by a package that landed so close. She assumed that someone was trying to hit her with some trash. Then she noticed the odd shape, and then she noticed the toes. Detectives and forensics are on scene within mere minutes. They cordoned off the cliffside path. Officers found a second bundle nearby, and this contained another leg. Both limbs had been crudely severed. The person that did this didn't seem to be professional nor prepared. The cuts had been done by someone improvising with poor equipment. Whoever had done this wasn't just trying to dispose of a body. They were trying to send it far away from any chances of recognition. However, forensics worked tirelessly to shed light on this victim's identity. By August the 31st, just 5 days later, DNA confirmed that the limbs belonged to a man named Simon Shotton. He was 49 years old, of Bournemouth. He had a known history with addiction, he had no fixed address, and he hadn't been seen in nearly 2 weeks. The last recorded use of Simon's mobile phone had been a call to a cash creator store in Bournmouth. This is like a pawn shop, and that call would become this case's first real lead. Police pulled CCTV from the shop, and they quickly discovered something shocking.
Phone! Where's the phone?
It's all the uniform?
Yeah, Debbie.
On August the 18th, just hours after they believed Simon's time on this earth was brought to an end, a woman calmly walked into Cash Creators and sold his phone for, well, cash. Her name was Debbie Pereira. She wasn't a stranger. She lived with her boyfriend, Benjamin Atkins, in a ground floor flat in Aylesbury Road. And Simon, whose legs had been discovered, he had been staying with them. First of all, he camped out in a tent in their garden, and later he stayed inside their home. Detectives now had 3 names, 2 suspects. But what they didn't know, what they were about to discover, was just how far and how deep down this case would stretch. It all started with a £30 dispute, and it unravelled into one of the most disturbing investigations that the Dorset police force had ever undertaken. Once Simon Shotton had been identified, Dorset police launched an urgent forensic and digital sweep. This is when they saw Debbie inside Cash Creators calm and unbothered. However, there was no mention or sign of Simon, just the sale of his phone. And then on August the 19th, Debbie and her boyfriend Benjamin were filmed walking down a Bournemouth street together. Benjamin was carrying a hacksaw, and this wasn't a tool that they had purchased. Instead, they had stolen it from a nearby shop, and from this point, the evidence snowballed. More CCTV showed the couple returning to their flat with heavy, oddly shaped bags. Neighbours reported a nauseating smell, a smell that one person described as like burning meat, coming from the garden. Benjamin reportedly told a neighbour that it was simply a dead fox, and that he was burning it just to get rid of the carcass. However, that was a lie, one that would haunt investigators, neighbours, friends and family, possibly forever. When police searched phone records, they confirmed that Simon's mobile phone had not been used since August the 18th. The phone signal died the same day that it was sold, the same day that Debbie was seen on CCTV selling it. Police tracked down friends of Simon's. They uncovered multiple text messages where he had accused Benjamin of stealing £30 from his wallet, money that he believed he was owed in exchange for illicit substances. It wasn't the first time that the pair had clashed. However, it would be the last.
Right, Debbie, time is 12 minutes past 9. You're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything for the main harming defence. Don't mention one question, something for the court.
What do you mean I'm
anything you do say, no,
suspicion of
give me
murder?
evidence.
What do you mean I'm in
Right,
suspicion?
just stay sat there.
What do you
Got
mean
you.
I'm in
Stay where you are.
Stay there.
Turn off.
Right.
Your hands are under that now.
Who is that? Right. Right. You're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You do not have to say anything that may harm your defence. If you do not mention one question, something which you later on in court, anything you do say may be given in evidence.
So that's your risk.
It's now September 2023. Armed with search warrants, police descend onto the couple's flat in Aylesby Road. The small property was surrounded by unkempt hedges and cluttered bins. Out the back, they found a garden with signs of a recent burning. There was ash, charred debris, and black bin bags. Inside 2 of those bags were human arms. They too were later confirmed to be Simon's. This confirmed 2 things. His time had come to an end on that property, and he had also been dismembered there. Forensics moved inside the flat. The utility room had been scrubbed hard with bleach. Fresh paint now coated the walls. However, luminol testing revealed what eyes could not. There were traces of blood on the floor and lower cabinets. Police believed that Debbie had spent days on end cleaning. Benjamin later confessed that he'd helped her to repaint the area. As officers canvassed the neighbourhood, one detail returned again and again. It was that awful smell. Residents recalled it lingering for days on end. One person remembered seeing thick, dark smoke curling over the garden fence. By the time police reached the back of the property, it was too late. The fire had long since gone out. But what was it that Benjamin had been burning? They would discover bit by bit. Months later, in February of 2024, more human remains were found. They were skull fragments, charred bone. These were discovered in Walpole Lane, a short walk from the flat. Investigators believe they had found what was left of Simon's head, and the rest of his body, his torso, was eventually discovered inside a black suitcase. It had been dumped in a nearby public garden, a space often visited by families, joggers and children. The suitcase had been left behind some shrubbery. Nobody could tell how long it had been there. Altogether, the body had been found in 4 separate locations: a cliffside path, the garden belonging to their flat, a public park, and a quiet neighbourhood lane. Each site represented one part of Simon. It created a map of trauma, a trail of panic, cruelty, or both. It had taken months, but now, with the recovery nearly complete, police were ready to bring the case to court. The argument that ended Simon Shotton's life wasn't about a secret or a betrayal, or even anything remotely substantial. It was about £30. During the trial, evidence showed Simon had accused Benjamin of stealing from him, stealing that £30 in cash. And to someone living hand to mouth and trading substances for shelter, it was enough to spark violent rage. Simon had been staying in a tent in the back garden, but later he was invited into the flat. However, tensions were always simmering between the two. Benjamin claimed that they weren't actually friends, and that Simon treated the home like a hotel. He said that he was disrespectful and demanding. And then on the night of August the 18th, Simon showed up, furious. Benjamin claims that Simon was carrying a sharp implement, that he poked him in the stomach with it and made threats. Benjamin told the court that he feared for his life, so he fought back with whatever was within reach. In his version of events, he grabbed a plastic hairbrush and began jabbing at Simon with the broken end. When this snapped, he said he switched to a speaker, and he said it wasn't a small one. It was a heavy portable speaker, and he used this to smash Simon in the head repeatedly. The judge would later describe this response as ferocious, unnecessary, and wholly out of proportion, because, you see, Simon was smaller, weaker, and he was outnumbered. Debbie was in the flat at the time. There was no sign that Debbie tried to stop the attack or to leave the premises. Benjamin's version of events didn't really sway the jury. They weren't buying that this was simply self-defense, especially not with what came next, because Benjamin did not call for help. He didn't report what happened. Instead, he just got high. And then, with Debbie's help, he began hiding the evidence, starting with Simon's body. He wrapped the limbs, he used bleach, he painted over red DNA, and over the next several days, piece by piece, he disposed of the man that had once lived in his garden, but a man who had called him a thief, and a man who didn't survive the confrontation. After his arrest, Benjamin Atkins didn't go quietly. Inside a police van, whilst being transported along with Debbie, a covert recording captured her asking him if he regretted anything. He didn't express remorse. He didn't deny what had happened. Instead, he said with no hesitation, "I'll look them straight in the eye and say, yeah, I'd do it again and again and again. If you let me go today, I'd find another one and do it again." He claimed that he only targeted dealers and pushers, but Simon had been his guest, and he didn't really fit those criteria. But he continued, kill, decapitate, and eat, the expletive term. Debbie, seated beside him, didn't argue. His answer was clear. It was a window into the mindset of a man who seemed to feel untouchable, a man who believed his actions were justified by some imagined code, one that targeted those he considered to be beneath him, even though he lived among them, and he actually was one of them. At trial, his barrister argued that Benjamin had been under immense stress, that he had consumed copious amounts of substances. Atkins himself admitted that if he hadn't been high, he never would have dismantled the body. He said that he was scared, traumatised, and in a state of panic. But then he undercut his own defence, again, by describing the disassembling process in detail. He told the jury that he used a hacksaw. Remember, the couple were captured on CCTV with a stolen hacksaw. He said he set up a tent in the garden to do it, that he worked over several days to break down the body, and then he burned the head, because he simply couldn't figure out what else to do with it. There was no attempt to claim insanity, just a dispassionate, matter-of-fact account of what happened, paired with a disturbing pride in how he handled the situation. And as for Debbie, she tried to downplay her role, but covert recordings showed her discussing the cleanup, the bleach, and what to do with the remains. And of course, CCTV had already caught her selling Simon's phone, an action that the prosecution used to prove that she knew Simon was already gone. Still though, she was acquitted of murder. The jury believed that Benjamin had acted alone in the killing, but Debbie wasn't completely off the hook. This is because she had cleaned up, she had lied, and she had helped to conceal everything that had happened. Together, they destroyed a man, a human being, and tried to erase him from the world. The trial lasted a month. It was held at Winchester Crown Court, where the jury saw grainy CCTV, heard some grim recordings, and listened as forensic experts mapped out the path of dismemberment. Benjamin had admitted to ending Simon, but he was still sticking to his story of self-defense. But ultimately, the jury would not believe him. They found Benjamin Atkins guilty of murder. He had already pleaded guilty to preventing the lawful burial of a body and perverting the course of justice. Debbie Pereira was found not guilty of murder, but guilty on the other two charges. Neither of them really showed any genuine remorse. Benjamin Atkins was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum term of 19 years before parole. The judge, Mrs. Justice Stacey, called his actions gruesome and shockingly callous. Debbie Pereira received just 4 years. In the courtroom, a victim impact statement was read by a barrister on behalf of Simon's son, Wesley. It was devastating. He said his father had battled addiction for years. but that he still had moments of joy and connection. He described himself as every bit my daddy's boy. And then, with raw, painful honesty, he addressed Benjamin Atkins directly. The lengths you've gone to in destroying my dad is completely different. There was no opportunity for us to visit his body, to tell him we loved him, to kiss him goodbye. The court was also told that not all of Simon's remains were ever recovered. His body could not be buried as a whole. There were fragments still missing. Dorset police called this one of their largest and most complex cases in their history. They credited hundreds of officers with tracking down the remains, with interviewing witnesses and assembling an in-depth timeline. Detective Chief Inspector Neil Third said it best. It's shocking to think such a small amount of money can result in the loss of a person's life. A neighbour speaking anonymously echoed how many felt. It's just so scary. It's like something out of a horror film. It just shows you don't know who your neighbours really are. Be careful out there, and I'll see you soon.